So hi, everybody. I just first wanted to take this moment to acknowledge that my presentation today takes place on the shared unceded traditional territory of the Katsi, Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish peoples in Surrey, BC. I had the pleasure of working with the Public Health Association of BC for my practicum placement. And the main product that I worked on was creating an educational tool for the general public that would be integrated with iBoost Immunity. So IBI is an online educational platform that's made possible by PHABC, BC CDC, and the BC Ministry of Health. And it aims to counter misinformation, anti-scientific myths about immunization, communicable diseases, and other related issues. And so the basis of my practicum product was addressing misinformation management. We know that public health is pivotal in protecting and promoting the health and well-being of the entire population, and misinformation has the ability to undermine this. It can influence public preferences, erodes trust in public health, and it poses a threat to the delivery and evidence-based guidelines and recommendations. The pandemic has certainly exemplified the negative societal consequences that misinformation can have on public judgment, attitudes, and reasoning. We saw it firsthand here in Canada surrounding the trucker protest. So it can lead to suboptimal health behaviors and public health policies, reduces overall trust in authorities, and also has created a larger problem involving racism, instigation of violence, spreading of conspiracies, creating conflict, and polarization. In the context of vaccine hesitancy, misinformation is notably prevalent amid vaccine information. It shapes vaccine sentiment and hesitancy. And even with the overwhelming evidence on the success of vaccination programs, the number of individuals perceiving vaccines as unsafe and unnecessary is growing. And its persistence has been a barrier to maintaining optimal vaccine coverage rates. If we take the unsubstantiated and thoroughly refuted claim of the MMR vaccine causing autism, it's resulted in MMR coverage rates to decline, led to resurgence in measles outbreaks across the globe, and by consequence, these outbreaks have led to significant increases in expenditures in public health responses. Spreading of misinformation is nothing new. Perspectives on vaccines have always had a long-standing history of hesitancy, fear, and opposition. You can see a cartoon in the middle there that was made in 1802 depicting a crowd turning into cow humans after receiving the smallpox vaccine, or anti-vaccine posters from Montreal in 1885 during a smallpox outbreak where anti-vaccine groups protested mandatory vaccine measures that led to public violence and took years for the vaccine to gain acceptance. And most recently here in the 21st century, we see similar protests against public health and government measures. So really, even across generations and time periods, the beliefs and emotions that underlie vaccine opposition have remained relatively consistent since the very first vaccine was introduced. And so in the last several decades, interventions aimed at combating misinformation have relied on a knowledge deficit model, assuming that individuals only lack an understanding of information or facts, and it really just focused on closing the knowledge gap. But in reality, there are many drivers that influence beliefs and truth judgments. Take, for instance, contextual environment. So personal ideology and worldviews have a relationship with the persistence of misinformation. A study by Pennycook and al. Found that individuals tend to believe and share information that are based more on personal belief, like partisanship over the accuracy of the information itself, or usage of complementary and alternative medicine is a predictor of unwillingness to reason with scientific evidence. And trust is a critical variable in support for government measures and policies. Mere exposure to conspiracy theories can predispose people to reject official information, even if these claims are factually dismissed. And the growing popularity of the internet and social media as an important source of health information is problematic because anybody can self-publish information without accountability or accuracy. A study by Hernandez and al. Revealed that of the most influential profiles,
Uh-oh, we've lost you, Christina. Give her a few seconds to come back to us. Cue elevator music.
Problem of
Back.
self-perpetuating polarization and entrenched viewpoints. Misinformation is also often presented in simple and emotionally provoking formats. Findings from Rodriguez et al. Studies suggest that anecdotal stories lowered participants' ability to scientifically reason with the evidence presented to them. And anecdotal stories are also predominantly found in anti-vaccine misinformation messages. And when it comes to internal influences, we often rely on mental shortcuts, so heuristics, to make decisions and judgments quickly. But these are also the very same processes that can misguide us, even if we know better. So misinformation affects everyone. Research on information persuasiveness commonly suggests emotion as the origin to decision-making, judgment, and actions. It can affect our attitudes surrounding science-related issues, how people process scientific information, and it tends to activate our cognitive biases. A study by Martel et al. Found that when information presented to participants evoked an emotional reaction, regardless of the type of emotion or valence, it increased the likelihood of believing misinformation and also suggested that momentary emotion of any kind made it harder for participants to recognize true from false information. So really, it's becoming clear that facts, for the most part, are irrelevant, and stronger factors can override accuracy. So the concept
Christina, we haven't lost you, but we've lost your audio. She can't hear us. Or maybe it's just me. I don't think it's just me, though.
Separate review of past and current approaches on policies on immunization for a specific regulation. And the conclusion was that the current solutions are just not enough. So we wanted to try a tool that would target people when they're most vulnerable to misinformation. And it really just embraces the reality and complexity of misinformation drivers. We know that we each have unique motivations and beliefs, and we wanted to take the opportunity to create a tool that focused on a factor that applies to everyone: emotions. So there's value in focusing on the role of emotions as a first line of defense towards what makes us vulnerable to misinformation. And we wanted to produce something that was easy to learn, relatively short, fun, would tailor to each individual, and the intention would be to use it in concert with other established interventions. So for the practicum product, I created content and supporting evidence that would be operated through a quiz, and it would be designed to integrate with IBI. It's for the general public, but for an audience that would be willing and open to learn more. And it uses a new approach to help individuals self-identify areas in which they may be vulnerable to misinformation. So the approach, which we've named the emotional appraisal approach, focuses attention on emotional reactions and taking them into account when you encounter information. So as users go through the quiz, it would be tailored to each individual, as presumably only topics, areas, issues that personally matter to you, that you're passionate about, care about, interested in, would cause emotional reactions. And it's not about suppressing your emotions or that having an emotional reaction is a bad thing. It's just that emotions are expected and they happen without choosing to feel them or having to think about them. But sometimes they can lead us astray or they could cloud our judgment. And to the best of our knowledge, the EAA and the quiz is the first of its kind, so efficacy of the product is yet to be evaluated. So now I wanted to take you through a quick mock of the product. It's not yet live. The next step is to have the web designers take the content and make it functional on the IBI platform. But basically, during the quiz, the users would go through a chosen set of various posts, headlines, as if they were scrolling through their news feed or social media app. Each question would be based on 4 overarching themes: government, complementary and alternative health, conspiracy, trust, and science. And it would be presented similar to a live stream feed. So as users scroll through the feed, if they have a reaction in that moment, they choose any one of the 7 emojis that best represents their emotional state, just like you see there. And they can click on as many emojis as they'd like for each post or headline. If they feel neutral or nothing to it, they just keep scrolling. So the idea is some headlines or posts might capture your attention in that moment, and for other headlines or posts, you may not react at all. The user then would be placed under a vulnerability stream. It would be shown by a personality type, just like you see in the image there. And the participant could be under multiple vulnerability streams. They're not just limited to one. Then the user would be given further details regarding the results, explaining the particular vulnerability stream, what they mean, the various factors influencing belief and acceptance, and then the aim of our approach. So despite being one of the most valuable public health interventions, vaccines continue to be a target of their own success, fueled by misinformation. And so, of course, there's an urgent priority to fight it in order to ensure that vaccine programs continue to succeed. We recognize that misinformation affects everyone, and in a time where we're generating knowledge faster than we can consume, we don't have time to check our sources on everything we come across. So it's really about equipping individuals with a tool that doesn't require much time out of their day. It may not work for everyone, but it may help in processing the information in front of you. And the intention is adopting a simple approach that takes emotions into account when you come across information. And if it provokes an emotional response, like makes you feel denial, triumph, smug, outraged, elated, just take a moment and question whether this information is actually true and use it as a signal to use with other interventions, like then checking the source or fact-checking websites for its truth value.
Christina, we're going to have to stop you there. We're beyond 10 minutes now. I suspect you're at the end, so.
I'm done, yeah.
Okay, great.